Hello, my name is Naomi. When I was just 14, my parents drove me to my grandfather's porch, left without a word, and never came back. No calls, no birthdays, nothing. For 10 years, I thought maybe they'd had a reason. But then, Grandpa died. And suddenly, they showed up, smiling, dressed in black, asking about his $45 million estate like nothing had happened. They said they were here to grieve. But were they really mourning him? Or chasing the money they once walked away from? They tried to sue me, follow me, break me. The day they left me didn't start with shouting. It started with silence, the kind that presses against your skin like cold air through an open window. I sat in the back seat of my parents' car, my knees tucked to my chest, a sweater balled up under my chin. It was my favorite one, sky blue with the little stitched initials NC that Grandma had sewn on herself. Neither of them spoke. My mother stared straight ahead, her hands tight around the steering wheel. My father tapped his knee, rhythmic, anxious. The tires hummed beneath us, rolling down that winding North Carolina road I'd known all my life. I cleared my throat, trying to push the words up. "Where are we going?" Mom blinked but didn't look back. "To your grandpa's, just for a little while." Just for a little while. I remember that phrase, how carefully she chose it, how her voice was too even, too smooth, like she'd practiced in front of a mirror. I was only 14, but I wasn't stupid. Something was wrong. "Is this like before, when you went to Florida?" I asked. Dad let out a short exhale, part laugh, part regret. "No, sweetheart, this is different." When we pulled up to Grandpa Eldon's driveway, I sat frozen, gripping the strap of my bag. My mother still didn't look at me. My father reached over, opened the door from the front and mumbled, "Go on, he's expecting you." But that was a lie. Grandpa stepped out, still in his gardening gloves, his forehead creased with confusion. He looked at me, then at the car. "What's going on?" "They didn't say," I answered, stepping out slowly. The wheels were already turning before the screen door had even shut behind me. I didn't cry right then. I couldn't. My body didn't know how to process what had just happened. I turned back toward the street, half expecting the brake lights to flare, the window to roll down, my mother's voice to call out, "Naomi, wait! We forgot to tell you something." But nothing. Just the tail lights shrinking until they disappeared behind the curve. Inside, Grandpa Eldon set a pot of water to boil. He tried to talk, to ask about school, about the field trip I'd missed. But I wasn't listening. I kept scanning the window, every pair of headlights tricking my brain into hope. Later that night, when he burned the spaghetti, he muttered, "Guess I'm out of practice." I smiled because I didn't want him to feel bad. He brought me a forkful and said, "Eat up, kiddo. Tomorrow's going to be better." But tomorrow didn't come. Not the one I was waiting for. The guest room smelled like mothballs and old wood. I unpacked my bag, looking for the things I'd always carried. My instant camera, the birthday card Mom wrote me last year, that little charm bracelet I wore every summer. Gone. In their place was a crumpled receipt from a pawn shop in Charlotte. A few item codes. One said Charm B. Another, Kodak Instax. My gut twisted. They'd sold them. My keepsakes, my memories, my life, converted into cash. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and let the betrayal settle in like a fever. The next morning, Grandpa made scrambled eggs. I nodded through it, trying not to cry when he asked what I wanted to do that weekend. As I reached for my fork, I remembered a week earlier, asking my mom to come to my school dinner. She had smiled and said, "I've got something more important that night." Now I knew what that something was. Around noon, I took my plate to the sink, then wandered into the living room. The clock ticked loud, too loud. Every time a car passed outside, I flinched, running to the window. By evening, I stopped running. But I still watched, and waited. The days that followed blurred together. Grief doesn't move in straight lines. It swirls, clings, stops your breath at the most ordinary moments. Sometimes it was the smell of pipe tobacco lingering in Grandpa Eldon's chair. Sometimes it was the hollow quiet after dinner, where his voice used to fill the silence. By the time the funeral arrived, I thought I had braced myself for everything. I was wrong. The service was small, simple, just how he would have wanted it, no fanfare, no spectacle. A few of his old colleagues came. Some former students too, each sharing stories about how he'd pushed them to be better, how he believed in them even when no one else did. I sat in the front row, the gold key necklace he gave me resting just below my collarbone. My hands were folded tight in my lap. Then they walked in. It was like someone dropped ice water down my spine. The door creaked, a breeze swept in, and there they were, Marlon and Lorene, standing side by side like a pair of wax statues someone forgot to dust off. I froze. 10 years. 10 full years of nothing. No calls, no birthday cards, no apologies. And now here they were, dressed in black, acting like it was just another Sunday service. Marlon nodded toward the front row like he expected me to wave him over. Lorene smiled, fake and polished, and whispered to the usher, "We're her parents." I couldn't move. My pulse thudded in my ears. They didn't just look older, they looked worn, like life hadn't been kind, but somehow they still wore entitlement like a tailored coat. They slipped into the second pew behind me, as if nothing had ever happened, as if they hadn't left a child on a doorstep and driven away. When the service ended, people began to trickle out, offering hugs and handshakes. I kept my eyes low until I felt a familiar perfume, cheap vanilla and lavender. I didn't have to look up. "Naomi, my sweet girl," Lorene murmured, reaching for my arm. I pulled back before she could touch me. "Don't." Her face crumpled like I had wounded her. "We came as soon as we heard. We're so sorry. Your grandfather, he meant the world to us." Marlon chimed in, louder than necessary. "He was proud of you, Naomi. You've grown into quite the woman." That was rich, coming from a man who hadn't seen me since I was barely a teenager. "You don't get to say that," I said, my voice sharp. "You weren't there." He blinked but didn't flinch. "We made mistakes, sure, but we're here now." Now, as if that erased everything. I turned to leave, but Lorene stepped in front of me, holding out a folded slip of paper. "I know you're angry, but please, I've been sick. It's cancer. Early stage. I didn't want to tell you like this." The paper was a printout, medical letterhead. I scanned it quickly, then tucked it into my purse without a word. Later that night, I ran a reverse image search. The same document popped up on a downloadable template site, a sample from a fake diagnosis form generator. She lied. I didn't call her out, not yet, but the fuse had been lit, and it was burning low. The next day, as I cleaned out Grandpa's study, a knock tapped lightly on the doorframe. It was Virgil, Eldon's lawyer, always in suspenders, always carrying a worn leather folder that looked older than both of us combined. "I figured you'd be here," he said, walking in slowly. "He left something for you, but more importantly, he left a warning." I tilted my head. "What kind of warning?" Virgil lowered his voice. "Your parents. He suspected they'd show up once he passed. He took precautions." He reached into his folder, pulling out a sealed envelope and a typed memo. "The will reading is in 72 hours. You'll need to be there, and you'll need this." He tapped the gold key around my neck. I stared at it. Suddenly it felt heavier than before. "What exactly did he leave behind?" I asked. Virgil gave a measured smile. "Let's just say, more than memories." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, turning the key over in my fingers. My thoughts spiraled. I remembered waiting by the window all those years ago, convinced they'd return for love. Now I knew better. They came back, but not for me. "You waited 10 years to show up," I whispered into the quiet. "Let's see what you're really here for." The morning came, heavy with gray clouds, but I didn't leave my room. I spent most of the day sorting through old files, trying to ignore the mental static in my head. By sunset, the light had shifted just enough that Grandpa's study didn't feel so haunted. It wasn't just a room anymore. It was a vault, a place where his intentions had been carefully buried, protected. I walked in slowly, every creak of the floorboards under my feet making the space feel more alive. The scent of cedar was still there, sharp and grounding. His desk sat untouched, the leather chair slightly turned, as if he had just gotten up. I opened the middle drawer, not expecting much. Stationery, a few loose paper clips, an old checkbook, nothing important. But something in the back corner caught my attention. A ridge, barely noticeable, where the wood didn't quite line up. I pressed against it. It popped open. Beneath the false bottom was a sealed folder marked in Grandpa's cursive, M&M, March 2011. My throat tightened. I pulled it out and laid it flat. The contents made my pulse race. Copies of legal documents, each one a fake. Signatures forged with painful accuracy. A notarized letter with Eldon's name. Except it wasn't his signature. A deed transfer authorization. Authorization to move his financial accounts. My mother's and father's names appeared again and again. I couldn't breathe. They didn't just leave me. They tried to take everything while I was still under Eldon's roof. I had spent years believing their absence was shame. But this, it was strategy. It was theft in motion. Among the pages was a letter from Eldon to his attorney, dated just weeks after the forged documents. They attempted to access my retirement accounts through falsified permissions. I am initiating full legal protection. Remove them from all access, including emergency contact privileges. Naomi will remain with me. It all made sense now. The silence. The distance. Eldon hadn't been cold. He had been protecting me. And they weren't just guilty of abandonment. They were trying to rewrite ownership, legacy, blood. I sat down in the leather chair, hands trembling slightly. I reached for the drawer on the left, needing air, needing something else. What I found next almost broke me. A journal, bound in cracked black leather. Eldon's handwriting covered every page. Some entries were mundane, weather, meetings, recipe notes, but one stood out, dated 3 years ago. I've been debating whether to leave it all to the Montgomery Foundation. It's clean, detached, no strings. But Naomi, she shows up. She studies, works, never asks for anything. She reminds me of how I started. That means something. There was more. If anything happens to me, let the key decide. I stared at the words, numb. Grandpa had thought of giving it all away, to strangers, to some clean nonprofit name. But something about the way I lived changed his mind. And now? The weight of that decision was sitting against my chest in the form of a small gold key. I stood up, carrying the folder and journal into the hallway. My feet moved on their own, past the den, into the kitchen, where I dialed Virgil's number. He answered on the first ring. I found something, I said. There was a pause. You found the file? How did you know it was there? Because Eldon knew you'd be the only one who'd look, Virgil replied calmly. He told me if you ever needed to prove intent, that file was your shield. I placed a hand on the counter, bracing myself. They forged legal papers, tried to drain his accounts. I know, he said. He stopped them just in time, but they've been waiting for another shot ever since. My voice went flat. They came back for the money. They came back for control. But it's too late, Virgil said. The will is tomorrow. Brace yourself, Naomi. You'll hear things that aren't just lies. There'll be manipulations designed to undo you. I didn't sleep that night. I sat back in Grandpa's study, surrounded by his things, by the quiet hum of the house he kept safe for so long. In my left hand was the folder filled with betrayal. In my right, the journal filled with trust. They thought they could steal what they never earned. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling as the hours slipped by. Tomorrow, I whispered, you'll learn the cost of coming back empty. I didn't even realize the sun had risen until the light bled through the hallway, cutting across the study floor. I changed clothes slowly, methodically, like putting on armor. The pendant rested on my chest, heavier than gold should feel. I tucked it beneath my blouse, then grabbed the sealed folder and stepped out the door. Downtown Asheville was buzzing, too alive for a morning like this. The law offices of Virgil Penn sat in a quiet brick building with a brass nameplate no one polished often. But it wasn't the outside that mattered. It was what was about to happen inside. I stepped into the reception area and was immediately met with silence that felt charged, electric. Lorene and Marlon were already there. She wore a sharp gray blazer, her hair pulled back like she was running for Senate. He looked even more artificial, smiling at the receptionist, as if today were just another meeting to renegotiate a contract. Virgil greeted me without a handshake, just a look. A subtle nod. They're in the conference room, he said, voice low. Everything's set. I pushed the glass door open and stepped inside. They both turned as I entered, and for a brief moment, no one spoke. Lorene smiled, far too bright. Naomi, honey. Don't, I cut her off. My voice was even, but it echoed in the wood-paneled room. Virgil sat at the head of the table. A large steel box lay in front of him, with an ornate keyhole at its center. I walked to my chair and sat directly opposite my parents. Shall we begin? Virgil asked. No one objected. I reached into my blouse and pulled out the pendant. The key slid perfectly into place and clicked. Virgil opened the box, revealing a velvet folder with a red wax seal and the emblem of Eldon's personal legal insignia. Virgil broke the seal and began to read aloud. I, Eldon William Calloway, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this my final will and testament. I leave the entirety of my estate, comprising all financial assets, properties, shares, and holdings, to my granddaughter, Naomi Elise Calloway. The air snapped. Lorene lurched forward. That's absurd. She's a child. I'm 24, I said flatly. Marlon narrowed his eyes. There's no way this holds up. She manipulated him. Virgil didn't blink. Eldon executed this will with full mental clarity. We have documentation from his primary physician. Further, Naomi was legally emancipated at 17. All of this has been legally reviewed and audited. He handed them a file. You'll find everything you need inside. Lorene turned red, her voice shrill. This is theft! I stayed silent. Then I pulled the second folder from my bag and placed it on the table. If you want to talk about theft, I said slowly, we can talk about this. Virgil opened it and passed out copies to both of them. Marlon's eyes flicked back and forth quickly. Lorene blinked, confused, until she realized what she was holding. A 2011 asset transfer form, with her forged signature, and Eldon's too. Except Eldon never signed it willingly. Virgil spoke without raising his tone. We have witnesses ready to testify that Eldon was coerced by his daughter, your wife, Marlon, into signing documents under duress. Lorene's hands shook. You can't prove, Virgil cut in, sharper now. We can. We will, and you should pray we don't press charges. Marlon turned toward her, his face tight. You told me this was real, he hissed. I didn't think she'd find it, Lorene whispered. I stood. This isn't about money, I said. This is about legacy, about the man who raised me when you walked out. You didn't just abandon me. You tried to erase him, erase what he stood for. No one spoke. You're not grieving, I continued. You're here because you failed the first time. You came back hoping he left the door unlocked. I turned to Virgil. Are we done here? He gave a small nod. I walked toward the door, past my mother's stunned face and my father's clenched jaw. But just as my hand reached the knob, I heard Marlon mutter under his breath, Then we'll take it back. By force. I didn't flinch, but I heard it. And I knew exactly what came next. 2 days later, I opened my front door to find a plain white envelope with no return address, hand-delivered and stamped urgent. There was no knock, no buzz from the intercom, just the silent threat of something waiting to break me. I brought it inside, peeled it open with my thumb, and scanned the contents. Plaintiff, Marlon and Lorene Calloway. Defendant, Naomi Calloway. Claim, undue influence and manipulation of a mentally compromised individual. I laughed, but it wasn't humor, it was fury, sharp and rising in my throat. They're suing me, I muttered, dropping the papers on my kitchen table like they were diseased. In their warped version of events, I was some Machiavellian granddaughter who orchestrated a decade-long con to bleed a dying man dry. They had the gall to argue Eldon was not of sound mind, and that I had isolated him from his biological family. They were rewriting history to erase what they couldn't control. By the afternoon, the story had hit a local gossip site. My neighbor Julie texted me a screenshot. $45 million heiress, accused of elder exploitation, family demands justice. I didn't respond. Instead, I yanked my blinds closed and locked both bolts. Just because you expect a punch doesn't mean it hurts less when it lands. Later that day, as I stepped out for coffee, hood up, sunglasses on, I saw him. Same man, same beige windbreaker. He'd been across the street the day before. Now he was sitting at the corner table outside Perch Cafe, pretending to read a paper upside down. I paused mid-step. He looked up, made eye contact, flinched. I crossed the street straight toward him. "You lost?" I asked. He stood too fast, the chair screeching behind him. "Who are you with?" I pushed again, voice cold. He took off without another word, bolting down the sidewalk like I had a badge. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. I had enough. That night I called Virgil. "Private investigator," he confirmed. "Hired through a third-party firm in Knoxville. Traced the payment. It came from your father's business account." "So they're watching me now," I said. "They're building a smear campaign," Virgil replied. "If they can't win in court, they'll try to break you in the court of public opinion." I stared at the wall for a long moment. Let them try. Before I went to bed, I sat on the floor of my bedroom with my laptop and started a digital archive. Every voicemail from Eldon, every video of us together, his handwriting on cards, medical records, tutoring receipts, old calendars with Naomi's science fair scrawled across them. I labeled each file with care. This wasn't paranoia, it was war prep. Then I recorded something for myself. A simple video, no makeup, no filters, just me. If you're watching this, it's because I forgot who I am. So let me remind myself. I'm not that girl they left behind. I'm the woman who got back up when they expected me to disappear. I hit save. The next day, I stepped outside for air. The sun was low, casting long shadows down my street. I returned home, calmer somehow, grounded. I thought I'd finally caught my breath, but when I reached my door, I saw it. A folded piece of paper slid neatly under the threshold. No envelope, just 6 words, all in block capitals. "You're not untouchable, little girl." I didn't scream, I didn't call the police. I opened my door, turned every deadbolt, and sat in the kitchen with the lights off, watching the hallway, waiting. Let them come. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a cold cup of coffee still sitting untouched on the table. The hallway light was still on. I'd left it that way, not because I was scared, but because I wasn't willing to let them scare me. Not anymore. The note from last night sat under a paperweight now. I'd reread it 3 times, not because I doubted what it said, but because I needed to see the threat in ink. Cowards send messages in whispers and shadows. I needed to burn it into my memory. That afternoon, I opened my email and saw the flood had begun. Was Naomi groomed to inherit? Young heiress or manipulator? Granddaughter or gold digger? The headlines weren't from tabloids. They were from mainstream regional outlets. Someone was feeding them stories. Lies packaged as narratives, tailor-made to destroy my name. My phone buzzed. Virgil. "Turn on the drive folder," he said without saying hello. "There's something Eldon left behind for a moment like this." When I opened the shared link, I froze. It was a video file, time-stamped 6 months before Eldon died. In the frame, Grandpa sat in his leather chair. His posture was upright, his voice firm, eyes clear. "I, Eldon Calloway," he said, "am of sound mind and body, and this is my declaration. I have chosen to leave my estate to Naomi Calloway, not out of obligation, but because she has shown integrity, discipline, and love without condition. This is my will, and I am aware of what I'm doing." I didn't cry. I uploaded the video. Within 2 hours, it spread across every major platform. My inbox exploded. Supportive messages from former teachers, childhood friends, threats from anonymous trolls, accusations, praise, and then came the call that made my stomach drop. "Naomi," Dean Andrews said through the phone, "we need you to come in. Today." I sat in his office with my hands folded in my lap. He clicked his pen too many times. Finally, he said it. "There are concerns about the lawsuit, the media portrayal. We're reviewing your scholarship." I nodded once. No tears, no begging. "I understand," I said. "But you should also understand this. Everything I've been accused of is false, and the video you've no doubt seen confirms that. If this university is about values, then you need to ask yourself what yours are." He didn't respond, only said, "We're postponing any decisions until this settles. You may continue attending classes, for now." For now. I was hanging by a thread. That night, I sat at my desk and built a timeline, documenting everything, every lie they told, every account I could verify, every move since the funeral. Then I clicked record on a live stream. The lighting was harsh. I didn't fix it. My name is Naomi Calloway, I began, and I'm not here to plead or perform. I'm here to protect what was entrusted to me. I laid out the facts, the video, the lawsuit, the smear campaign. I spoke without venom. I didn't need it. The truth, raw and bare, was sharp enough. This isn't revenge, I said near the end. This is defense. I was 14 when they left me. I'm not 14 anymore. Within minutes, hashtag spread. #Stand with Naomi, #truth over blood. After the stream ended, I refreshed my inbox. One unread message, from Marlon. Subject: You just made this a war. I sat back in my chair and cracked my knuckles. Let's go then. 3 days had passed since the live stream that changed everything. I was back at Naomi Holdings, seated in the executive conference room with my senior leadership team, analyzing post-event data. We were dissecting market reactions, client sentiment, and brand engagement. To our collective relief, most responses were overwhelmingly positive. Investors appreciated the transparency, clients praised the resolve. Internally, morale had never been higher. Then the door slammed open. Rachel, my head of security, a woman who once faced down protesters in a monsoon without blinking, walked straight in without knocking. That never happened. You need to come to the lobby, now. She didn't raise her voice, but the weight behind her words left no room for debate. Without hesitation, I pushed my chair back and followed her. The hallway echoed with the sharp strike of my heels against marble, each step loud, deliberate, unavoidable. The elevator ride was brief, silent. When the doors opened, chaos greeted us. Phones, lights, people. Right in the center of it all stood them, my parents, as if they had simply wandered in off the street for a friendly visit. Lorene wore her signature strand of pearls, paired with a cream-colored suit too immaculate to be sincere. The kind of outfit worn to impress a courtroom or manipulate a camera. Marlon, ever the showman, sported dark sunglasses inside and had his arms spread wide like some long-lost patriarch ready to host Thanksgiving. They'd come prepared to perform. Naomi, Marlon bellowed, spinning to face the nearest phones. This company was built on blood. She wouldn't have anything if it weren't for us. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I stepped forward slowly, my posture unshaken. You abandoned me when I was 14, I said, my voice cool but firm. You forfeited any claim to my life, or anything in it. Lorene gasped, clutching her chest like a second-rate soap opera villain. Sweetheart, don't say that. We were young, lost. We made mistakes, but we are still your parents. No, I replied, cutting through her performance like glass. You were criminals. You stole from me, lied to me, sold off my childhood for drug money and cons. And if you're not out of this building in 2 minutes, I'll have security escort you out and file charges for trespassing and harassment. Marlon stepped forward, his smile gone. You're not the only Calloway left, Naomi. Don't think you can shut us out forever. A murmur swept through the crowd of employees and onlookers. Phones were now up everywhere. Someone whispered, She's live again. Good. Let them hear. I turned to the growing crowd. Let's get something clear, I said. These people, these two, didn't raise me. They abandoned me. They only came back when there was something to take. The lobby fell silent, save for the subtle hum of streaming devices. This company wasn't handed to me. I built it from the ashes they left behind. If legacy means anything, it's what we protect, not what we exploit. If you think blood entitles you to a seat at the table, then you don't understand a family. Lorene's carefully practiced expression faltered. Marlon sneered. Security stepped in, professionally but firmly ushering them toward the exit. The glass doors slid closed behind them, shutting out the past like a final punctuation mark. By the next morning, the moment had gone viral. 2.3 million views and counting. #Stand with Naomi, #Air with honor, #Legacy over blood. By midday, the board called an emergency session. Virgil, my longest-serving advisor and a board liaison, pulled me aside beforehand. Some members are nervous, he said cautiously. They're worried about the optics, investors, media, stock volatility, standard boardroom jitters. I walked in ready. I brought with me a full packet of documentation, timestamps, videos, screenshots, a precise timeline of everything leading up to the lobby incident. I didn't just come to defend myself. I came to end the conversation. I won't apologize for telling the truth, I told them. And I will not be silenced to protect outdated notions of brand image. If silence is the price of integrity, I'd rather be loud and honest. Some board members looked uneasy. A few nodded. None objected, at least not publicly. That night, I stayed late in my office and rewrote a strategic directive that had been on my mind for months. By the next morning, we'd launched a new initiative under my foundation, Air with Honor. It was more than a campaign. It was a public-facing advocacy branch to help others who had suffered betrayal at the hands of family, especially those who'd endured abuse, financial manipulation, or legal obstruction related to inheritance or legacy rights. This was bigger than me now. There were thousands, maybe millions of people out there watching that live stream. People who had been made to feel alone, powerless, voiceless. Now they knew they weren't. As I was shutting down my laptop that evening, a new notification popped up in my inbox. It was from my legal team. Urgent. Certified mail Marlon Calloway v. Naomi Calloway filed allegations. Defamation, business obstruction, inheritance fraud. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't catch. They weren't done coming for me. And now neither was I. The courthouse steps were slick with morning drizzle. Rain clung to the stone like a whisper, just loud enough to make you cautious. Reporters huddled at the bottom of the stairs, microphones in hand, eyes scanning for a story to devour. They reminded me of seagulls, restless, opportunistic, waiting for something to drop. I didn't stop. I didn't look at them. I didn't have to. I held the leather folder against my chest with both arms, like a shield. It contained more than documents. It carried years of silence, truths buried and unspoken. The echoes of a childhood stolen and the man who gave me back a name, a home, and a future. Inside the building, everything shifted. The air was stale and still, as if time itself had paused to listen. The courtroom filled faster than expected. The gallery was packed. Faces I didn't recognize, some sympathetic, some skeptical. Whispers stirred like wind against marble, brushing the edges of wooden benches and sharp-suited egos. Across the aisle, Marlon lounged like a man on vacation. Confident, relaxed. Like he thought the whole thing was a formality, just another performance where he played the victim and walked out richer than he came in. Lorene sat beside him, all pearls and feigned fragility, dabbing at her eyes with a neatly folded handkerchief. Her tears were dry, her nerves were rehearsed. Their lawyers matched the image perfectly, expensive suits, polished shoes, expressions carved from stone. They didn't come to argue facts, they came to sell fiction. Virgil leaned toward me, voice low. Just speak the truth. That's all they didn't count on. I nodded. It wasn't comfort I needed. It was clarity, and I had it. The trial opened exactly how I imagined it would, with character assassination disguised as reasonable doubt. An estranged child returns, spends a brief amount of time with her grandfather, and suddenly she's the sole heir? Their lead attorney delivered it like a joke, raising an eyebrow and glancing toward the jury as if waiting for a laugh. What are we supposed to believe? I watched the jurors carefully. One of them scribbled a note. Another frowned. The rest kept their faces neutral. Then it was our turn. Virgil rose slowly. He didn't need theatrics. He let the facts speak for themselves. Custody rulings from 2011, showing how I'd been legally removed from my parents' care. Documentation of my emancipation, signed and stamped. Medical assessments of Eldon's mental state, each one verifying his clarity in the final year of his life. Finally, he played the video, the one Eldon recorded 6 months before he died. His voice filled the courtroom. I've thought long and hard about this, Eldon said, looking straight into the camera. Naomi's the only one I trust. She's the only one who never asked for anything except time. She never once tried to take. She gave. That's what legacy should go to. The room was utterly silent. Then it was my turn. I stood and walked slowly to the stand. My hands were steady, my voice clear. He chose me because I stayed, because I didn't walk away when things got hard. I didn't ask for his money. I only ever asked for something simple, family. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. Then they called Lorene. She walked to the stand like she was made of glass, every step measured. She clutched her handkerchief like it was proof of something real. I always loved Naomi, she said, her voice quivering just enough. I sent letters, birthday cards. I tried to visit. I wanted to be in her life, but I was pushed out. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I waited for the pause between her words to widen. Then I spoke. "If you'd loved me, you wouldn't have left," I said. "You don't abandon someone and then expect to be welcomed back in when there's something to gain. Love doesn't work like that. Family doesn't work like that." The air shifted again. No one moved. The judge, who had watched all of this unfold with the patience of someone used to human drama, finally leaned forward and adjusted her glasses. "Case dismissed with prejudice. Miss Calloway retains all legal rights to the estate. Further claims of this nature will not be entertained." And just like that, it was over. I stepped out into the daylight. This time the rain had stopped. The clouds were beginning to break apart, and the sun cut through in pale golden rays. Reporters surged forward. Cameras clicked. Microphones thrust into my face. "Miss Calloway, do you feel vindicated? Do you have a comment on the ruling?" I kept walking. Some truths don't need a headline. Some victories don't need confetti. I walked down the courthouse steps, each one lighter than the last, and disappeared into the noise. That evening, I returned to my apartment and curled up on the couch with a blanket and a cup of chamomile tea. The city buzzed outside, but in my living room, there was only the soft glow of a floor lamp and the quiet hum of stillness. I opened my phone and scrolled through the flood of messages. Congratulations. Media requests. Supporters sharing their own stories. One message stood out. A DM request from an unfamiliar profile. No real name, just a muted image of a seascape as the avatar. I tapped it open. "I think we might share a father. I'm sorry about what you're going through. Alec, 28, Baltimore." My stomach sank. My heart paused. Same father. Different life. A half-sibling I never knew. A silence I hadn't expected to break. The next morning, I drove out to Eldon's grave. The groundskeeper had done his work. The grass had thickened, green and soft, and spring flowers bloomed around the headstone. I knelt down and sat cross-legged beside it, brushing a few leaves away. From inside my coat, I pulled out a folded letter, written by hand the night after the trial. I unfolded it slowly. "I kept my promise," I said aloud, voice cracking a little. "They came back, but I didn't fall. You built me to stand." I reached into my pocket and took out the gold key he'd left me, the one he said symbolized more than inheritance. It meant trust, continuity, a belief in something better than the past. I set the key gently on the stone, letting it rest there for a long moment, catching the morning light. Then I picked it back up and fastened it around my neck again. That night, I stared at Alec's message for a long time, fingers hovering over the screen. There was a new story waiting. This time, I typed, "Tell me your story." The hum of the copier beside my desk clicked off as I signed the last document in the stack. Just like that, it was official. The Eldon Legacy Foundation existed, legally, structurally, and spiritually. I leaned back in my chair, watching the ink dry on the paper bearing my grandfather's name, not as a benefactor or donor, but as a symbol of second chances. For the first time in a long time, the air in the office didn't feel like a battlefield. No phone calls from lawyers, no press ambushes at the elevator, no crisis to navigate. Just peace. The press launch happened on a cloudy Thursday, in the garden Eldon used to read in every Sunday. I stood at a podium that felt far too big until I looked up and saw the faces gathered, former teachers, youth counselors, volunteers, and a few teenagers whose eyes held the kind of silent fear I knew too well. "This foundation isn't about me," I began, adjusting the mic. "It's not about the Calloway name. It's about what we do when someone chooses to see us, not as broken, but as becoming." The applause wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind that stayed with you long after you stepped off the stage. Later that evening, I returned to Eldon's house, still mine, though it never felt like just property. I wandered through his study, fingers brushing over book spines, picture frames, his old globe. I don't know what made me open the bottom drawer of his file cabinet, but I did. A leather-bound notebook rested inside. Its pages were delicate with age, ink faded slightly at the edges. Toward the back, a dated entry caught my eye. I wanted to forgive Marlon. I wanted to believe he could grow. But then, Naomi brought me coffee on a day my hands were shaking and asked me what kind of cookies I liked. No agenda, no angle. Just kindness. I couldn't risk her being hurt again. So I locked the gate behind me, not because I didn't love my son, but because I loved my granddaughter more. I closed the notebook slowly, pressing my palm over the cover. Not grief, not anymore. Gratitude. A few days later, I met Alec. He didn't look like Marlon, thank God. We met at a quiet cafe tucked between two art galleries downtown. He was already seated when I arrived, nervously flipping through the menu. I sat across from him, letting the silence linger just long enough to feel real. "I don't want anything from you," he said finally. "I just thought, maybe we both lost something. Maybe talking helps." "Blood made us siblings," I replied. "Let's see if honesty can make us anything else." He smiled, and for once I smiled back without hesitation. Weeks passed. The foundation held its first outreach session. I visited one of our partnered shelters that afternoon, where a young girl, barely 13 maybe, approached me shyly. "Do you think people can start over?" she asked. I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. "I don't just think it," I said. "I know it." That night, walking into the main hallway of the Eldon Legacy Center, I passed his portrait. It hung above the entrance now, surrounded by stories we were collecting, each one written by someone who survived, rebuilt, or simply endured. I looked up at him. "They tried to define me by what they abandoned," I whispered, "but I chose to define myself by what I built." My phone buzzed. Another message from Alec. "Want to meet again next week?" I typed back, "Yeah, let's." Before I go, I want to say this. If you've ever been left behind, lied to, or made to feel small by the people who were supposed to love you first, you're not alone. I've been there, and I made it out. Not because I'm stronger than anyone else, but because I stopped waiting for closure from those who broke me and started creating it for myself. Legacy isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about choosing kindness when cruelty taught you silence. It's about choosing to build when others tried to tear you down. And sometimes, it's about letting go of what hurt you, not to forget it, but to prove it didn't win. To anyone watching who's facing a storm, whether it's family betrayal, legal injustice, or just the pain of being misunderstood, I see you. And you're not defined by who left. You're defined by who you decide to become. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to cut ties with someone you thought you'd never let go? Or maybe you're still holding on, wondering if they'll ever change? Let me know in the comments, what hit home for you in this story? If this video touched your heart, type 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't speak to you, I still want to know why. Drop your thoughts, and let's talk about it. And if you want more real stories that speak truth, healing, and second chances, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Because I've got more stories coming, and you deserve to hear every one of them. Thank you for being here. Really.